everybody, to the Parrot Stars podcast. My name is Alexis Highland. I am the manager at Parrot Stars, and I'm joined today by Ashley and Avery, who work with me at Parrot Stars. So we are deep into our podcast now. We've got a good number of episodes recorded. And we also should mention that Lucky is behind us, kind of hanging out on his little tree stand. So if you hear any kind of bird noise, it's either Lucky behind us or my other 3 little parrots in the background hanging out. Yeah. So, like I was saying, we are kind of deep into our podcast, and something that we started pretty early was this little tagline or catchphrase or slogan, whatever you want to call it, at the end of the episode, where we say, "Be kind to your parrot and it will be kind to you." So, since we've been mentioning it at the end of every single episode, we wanted to take a chance to explain why we chose that as our little slogan for this podcast and give you guys some context as to why we really are big advocates of showing kindness to your companion parrot as consistently as you can.
I think the only thing about it, well, not the only thing because we have to talk for a while. Well, the main thing about it is just simply like, that's the basis of having a good relationship with your bird at home. You know, if you show kindness, your bird will most likely show you kindness because they can really read on that. But we also say it at the end of all of our send homes. That's where it came from. We end that note with every new bird owner or, whatever with that slogan or saying. So it's just something to always keep in mind. We say it last because it's important.
Yeah. And it can sound kind of abstract. Like most people are going to be like, yeah, I'm kind to my parrot. I'm not mean to my parrot. But there's a little bit more than just the aspect of not being mean and being kind. So that even can be something where we remind ourselves to be patient or to not get frustrated or discouraged. So there's so much that goes into that. And anyone who's worked with parrots or had one knows that it is by no means easy to earn the trust of a prey animal, especially one that has not been domesticated the way a dog or a cat has. So, there's times where your parrot might not be receptive to training or being hands-on, or when we bring them home, they might be really scared. And so that kindness that we talk about is going to be how we approach them. Maybe we give them a little bit of grace when they are particularly scared, or if they aren't being receptive to being hands-on, not taking it personally and interpreting it as my bird doesn't like me or they're being mean to me. So kindness can mean a lot of things when it comes to working with animals that are really sensitive to our energy and our behavior.
Yeah, and they pick up on that stuff, and it's giving them, I guess, respecting their personal space. That can be a big part of it as well, especially when they do get home. And it's a whole spooky new place. So just giving them some privacy, like not hands all over, that sort of thing, is a part of that, just being kind of their personal being, basically.
Yeah, and I'll speak for myself, but I think most people could relate, or especially I think you guys, because I see it in you all the time. When I started this job, or my experience with parrots when I initially started, so again, this is a learning process, and I don't claim to be the end-all be-all parrot expert in the world. Like, I'm still actively learning and making my own observations about myself and parrots. But when I started, you kind of like touched on exactly where I was hoping we would kind of go with this conversation, is there was this expectation that in order to like prove that your parrot like trusted you, it would be like perched on your hand, or you'd be touching it or giving it the head scratches. And I think so much of the element of showing your parrot kindness is exactly what you just said, giving it the ability to have its own space and make a decision to come to you on its own free will. Because even when we started, there was like this big push that like if a baby bird didn't step up, like it was not tame, which we all know is totally not true.
Right.
We'll use the example of our little Major Mitchell at the store, which we've brought up several times in this podcast. It's a young bird. Okay,
Silly.
He's less than a year old, and he is very hard to get to step up, but he is absolutely, without question, the most charismatic, dynamic, goofing, and fun-loving parrot we have in the building.
I know. We were just talking about he has his facial expressions. I swear, yeah,
he
it's true.
has so much personality, and he loves attention. Like capital LOVE, loves attention. But it's not physical attention.
It's the way
That is not what he is interested in. And I think having the ability to kind of step back, show them the kindness and respect of saying like, hey, he's not ready for that like step up, cuddly, lovey-dovey-ness.
Yeah.
Maybe it will come with time as he like you mentioned, Ashley, develops more trust and understanding about humans, but it does not come to parrots naturally. Like they are going to be so instinctively terrified of us that when we push it, they are going to want to retreat. And like I said, just kind of, again, my starting with parrots is that like I always felt this kind of need or want to kind of like show the parrot through touch that like I wasn't going to hurt it. And like getting it to step up was like such a huge achievement. And what I've realized is that's really not the achievement. Like that was something that I wanted. Like I wanted the touch, that instant gratification. I mean, humans are incredibly tactile. Like we use touch as a huge part of our life and we use it among other humans. Like touch is a sign of affection. And we can so easily do it with cat and dog, but it's not that way with birds. Like they don't need that constant touch feedback from us to know that they're loved. So when I was able to, like that finally clicked for me when we were a few years in, like, hey, if I like keep my hands down and off of the animal and like let it be like a smile or talking softly, talking kindly to it, they were so much more likely to approach me, to take a treat from me, and then to eventually choose to step up for me. And I think that was like something that is the most invaluable thing that I've learned in this entire process is that they're going to reflect me. And if I'm being really pushy or insistent, their natural instinct is going to be like, this is weird or scary. And they're going to want to pull back or defend themselves, maybe in a form of a nip or a bite or just by straight up leaving the situation. So I think it's a really, really important thing to kind of be aware of when you're starting with a companion parrot, or if you already have one on your own, like just keep your hands down and start with the kindness coming from your mouth, from your facial expressions, from your overall body language, not the intense want of kindness to be shown through your hands or through those head scratches.
I know you have your own routines. You with Rascal and you with Baby, the ones you work with. Like you have little routines that you do before you kind of ask them to interact with you physically, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
I like that you said ask, and I like that you said choice so much there because, you know, sometimes you might ask a bird to step up and they might not. And sometimes people are inclined to really push into them and almost force them to step up in a way. And obviously, if your bird is in harm's way or something, there might be times where you do need to kind of push them to get them to safety. But if we're always doing things like this and not giving our bird the choice, even if they're complying with what we're asking, it can be kind of problematic for them. So providing and choices and asking is important. And I know sometimes people get scared if I give my bird the choice, what if they choose no? Well, they might at first. And when they realize nothing bad happens, more often than not, they're going to start to choose, yes, I will step up because they see that that boundary is respected. And I see it a lot with little birds that sometimes they get labeled as bitey or mean. And I think it's because being tiny, they are a little easier to grab or manhandle. And just because we can doesn't mean we should. So I always approach it with folks that let's treat our budgies, our parrotlets, our green cheeks with the same respect we give to a macaw.
Yeah.
If you do that, that kindness is going to like permeate through their behavior and yours as well. So treating the little guys with the same respect as a bird that has a powerful, strong beak, you will be so surprised at how willing the bird becomes to want to engage with you because they're not being forced or pushed. They have autonomy and the ability to choose to be with us in that moment. And that asking, that choice is powerful even for them.
Yeah.
Yeah, and when it comes to like asking them to do things, like something we talked about in a previous episode, but is so important to highlight in this theme of kindness is how we're relating with one another in the household or in the, like in our example, the store, like is also going to be something the birds can feel and understand. So it's, yes, being kind to the parrot, but that can kind of be a little bit, what's the word? Like indirectly passed to the parrot by showing kindness to the other people that live with you. I mean, and everybody's going to have bad days and families are families. Like it's not always easy to navigate through life with this like permeating kindness. Like there are going to be things that upset us and frustrate us. But it's so important that you do not direct that frustration, the anxiety, the sadness, the anger towards your parrot. Yeah. Like it just simply, you can't. They're not always the best emotional support animal in that way because unlike a cat or a dog who might sense that change in energy, they're going to be very receptive to that touch and that companionship, and they're going to kind of overlook it a little bit more, whereas a parrot is going to see it as a red flag because, again, they're the prey animal. We're predatory. To them, that kind of intensity that we're emoting is going to be scary to them. So if you're in a headspace that's not ideal, where you can't fully realize kindness in that moment and really project it onto the bird, then the recommendation is just going to be like to not engage with it in that moment. And like you guys know, like I can go through different emotions throughout the course of a day. Like it's pretty high stress job at times. And I'm not going to go to Rascal or to the baby room if I'm like totally over it or like not having a good moment. And I think even at times where I do like need to ask Rascal to step up if I'm a little bit agitated or frustrated, like exactly what you said, like I ask her to first. Like she's going to tell me right then and there if she's going to step up for me.
Yeah, she will.
And it's like, again, something that we'll continue to have conversations about in the future about doing the clicker training, but that's why we encourage people to do stepping up from the side. So the way I ask Rascal to step up is always from the side. I'm not pushing up on her belly and like giving her a harsh, forceful step up command. I am asking her to step up. I'm telling her what I'm expecting, but I'm asking her to do it because I'm not going to make her do it if she doesn't want to. Again, that's a little complex because you also don't want to be a pushover and like let them always dictate. But when it comes to like, that's clearly a bird that understands what step up is. She does it regularly. If she doesn't do it in that moment, it's for a reason. And being kind of self-aware is super important in that moment, especially when you're working with animals who are just trying to survive the only way they know how. Like they're putting a lot of hope and trust and faith that this big predator isn't going to do something scary or harmful to it. And the minute we kind of escalate a situation or show frustration, whether because it has something to do with the bird or not, we're going to potentially cross the line and cause a lot of fear in that parrot where you might get some behaviors that you are unwanted.
Definitely. I think it's worth repeating that they really pick up on that.
Yes.
Like they know exactly how you're feeling, maybe sometimes better than how you think you're feeling. So it's just important to keep in mind. I mean, like I learned that from horses. So horses are the same way. If you're nervous around them, it's not going to be a good time, you know, with them. So it's the same concept.
Yeah. And like, I think the horse example is one that people can envision pretty well because that is a massive animal that could like inflict a lot of harm and damage to a human. Like they're dangerous.
Yep.
But at their core, they are a prey animal.
Yes.
And we are the predator and they see it. So it's a good example because exactly like you said, if you come ripping and roaring up to a horse and you're really obnoxious with your motions or your like hand motions or you're doing weird things, like that's going to freak that horse out. And again, same thing's going to happen. They're either going to defend themselves or they're going to flee you. And parrots will do the same thing. They're going to defend themselves either in the form of a nip or a bite or they're going to flee you.
Yeah.
And to kind of prevent that situation from even occurring, stopping it before it happens is really going to help with the long-term relationship that you have with your companion parrot.
I think it's important to mention that we should also be kind to ourselves too, because being self-aware, if you are getting frustrated or disappointed, rather than pushing through it or attempting to in a given engagement with your bird, being kind to yourself, allowing yourself to go, okay, I'm frustrated right now. That doesn't mean I'm bad, but I do need to take a break. Stepping away from your bird, giving yourself the opportunity to kind of reset and then regroup with them is really important. And I think we can be really hard on ourselves sometimes because a lot of us know, okay, I need to be calm and confident with my bird because they're going to respond to it. But it's really hard if we're not feeling that. And we might want to push that down or push it away. But if we're kind to ourselves and allow ourselves to recognize what's going on, pause and regroup, it's just better in the long run for that relationship with your bird too.
Yeah, we're guilty of it too. Well, sorry.
Oh yeah,
No,
we're humans.
So there was like the example the other day where it was just a routine send home, and where it was a green cheek. I think it was a green cheek. Yeah. But for some reason, I don't know why, I was like really frustrated about the situation because it just was not like, was not going my way. And the green cheek obviously felt that.
Yeah.
And I took a step back and I was like, can you please help me wave this bird?
Yes.
And it went fine because you were chill. But, it's just something that, we all, no matter how much experience, I don't have overly too much experience. But no matter what, we just need to keep in mind.
I like that you asked for help too. I mean, sometimes it's really hard to ask for help. And I know there's days where like, I was having a slightly off day the other day and I was hanging out with baby and I mean, she's an umbrella cockatoo. She's particularly sensitive. And I was just having a difficult time getting her back in her enclosure and don't really know what it was about, but I know that I felt different. So she was picking up on it. And I literally had to come into the office and I was like, Alexis, I'm so embarrassed, but like, can you help me get her back in her enclosure? I'm not worried about her biting me, but she's like climbing on me while I'm trying to put her back. And even Alexis could tell, she's like, I think your energy is a little off right now. Like, let's take a breath. We got her in. It was totally fine. But like, this is a bird that I know like the back of my hand. I work with every single day. I trust her. She trusts me. But being human, I'm going to have my off days and they're going to pick up on it. And it's okay to ask for help. You asked for help with that green cheek. Everything was fine. I asked for help with baby. There was no issue. Came back the next day feeling 100%. And I mean, she knew it and she was her calm, confident self like she always is with me. So
totally. Yeah. And something that I'm consistently trying to coach myself on in life, but because so much of my life is spent with parrots, like it's a direct application to my day to day, is to kind of like think about my actions before I do them. And I think planning out the interaction that you're going to have with your parrot is really helpful. Okay. So when you tell yourself before you open the cage door, like, I am going to show this bird kindness. Like you said, I'm going to show myself kindness. If I'm starting to feel that little bit of frustration or aggravation, I'm going to try taking a deep breath. See if that centers myself and gets me back to a mindset where it's just pure kindness the whole time. And then I'm going to have the self-awareness that if things are not vibing or something feels off or different or not, like this could result in a bite or this could result in me getting frustrated at the animal, like having the foresight to know like an option is to walk away. And having interactions that you have with your bird completely planned out and having that self-awareness is going to really help. And it takes practice. Like the more you do that, the more self-aware you're going to be. So the more times you tell yourself, all right, I'm going to show my bird kindness. I'm going to smile throughout the entire interaction. I'm going to keep my hands down. I'm not going to try to incessantly touch it. Like I'm going to be really thoughtful about every little thing I do. Your odds of success are going to go way up because I know in my experience, and I think a lot of people would agree, that a lot of times those nips and bites come out of moments of unpredictability, or they're often unexpected or what feels like unsolicited. And it's often because there's a lack of awareness on our part to really say what was transpiring in that moment to cause the bird like to feel that that was its only form of communication in that moment. So it helps with your relationship, but it also like helps you not get bit. It helps you create a better relationship with the bird.
It kind of goes along with that. And for example, like you go over to somebody's house and they have dogs, and then like you interact with the dogs, and they're like, "Whoa, my dog's never, you're like a dog person because my dog never like goes up to someone like that." Well, it's probably because that person is literally just calm and chill. And animals, not just parrots, but animals will pick up on that and be attracted to that because they feel safe. So it's just something that really, and everybody wants to be that type of person.
Yeah.
I get so, I get so unreasonably jealous when, a dog like didn't interact with me, but did somebody else. And I'm like, oh man,
I know.
So you want to be that way. So just try to apply that. And that's why it's so important to build that relationship with your bird.
Mm-hmm. I think the biggest element or something that's the most important part of this conversation for me, and like one of the core foundations of how we present ourselves as Parrot Stars to the public, is that I'm really, really working hard, and I know you guys are as well, to change the vocabulary that is being used when people talk about companion parrots. And I'm going to try to be careful because this is something that I can get like really, really fired up about and really defensive about because I spend so much time with parrots. And for me, and I think for you guys as well, you'd agree that they are just innocent, helpless creatures that we are choosing to put in the situation they're in. So it's not appropriate for us to call them a-holes or jerks or feisty or aggressive or mean. And those are so often the terms that we hear all day long when people talk about their birds.
Yeah.
And it's often the terms that are used on social media about companion parrots. I mean, and I'm not saying like you can't make a joke here and there, like, but when I constantly see t-shirts that like my bird is an a-hole or my bird is a jerk or bites for free, like we're creating this like culture of birds being nasty and mean. And that is not their nature. They're intensely social animals. And we know because we observe them in the wild, they're highly affectionate animals.
Yes.
They don't have a predatory killer instinct where they're lunging at other animals to attack. If a parrot is lunging at you, it is because it is not okay. Like it's telling you, I am not okay. I need to get out of the situation that I'm in. Or it's trying to communicate something to get you to change your behavior. So I think myself and like our staff, but like the parrot community in general, we need to do a better job of just like changing the vernacular that's used for companion parrots. Like we have to. We can't keep calling them jerks or mean or feisty because we're kind of like telling ourselves that's what the bird is. When really that's not what the bird is.
Right.
The bird is just behaving and it's just sitting in a cage wanting a relationship. And when you show it kindness and you change your vocabulary to be like, my parrot is loving, my parrot is shy, my parrot is nervous, but I can like get it out of its shell and I can create this like love and the bond. When you're starting to change your vocabulary to be more positive, I know from my experience, since I've stopped looking at them as that way, like a negative, and started really look at them in a positive light, my engagement with parrots has completely changed. And I think like another kind of concrete example of that, and I want to acknowledge that like I know when birds come in for grooming or like for boarding that they're going to act different because they're out of the security of their home. I do acknowledge that their behavior is slightly different outside of the house than it is inside the house. But when people come into boarding or grooming and they're like, careful, he's a biter, or careful, he's mean. And it's like, well, he's not those things. That's not their nature. Those are just behaviors that you're deciding are characteristics. And I mean, you guys are there, like we don't get bit by people's birds because we're not expecting it.
Yeah.
We're not like choosing that this is going to be the outcome of this interaction. And I think it's gotta change. And I often stay off of those social media groups because like
Yeah.
it sometimes feels a little overwhelming. Like, how can I change this entire bird culture myself? So like I try to do it in my day-to-day actions, and hopefully with our platform, like people see like we don't call birds jerks on our Facebook page. We don't refer to them as a-holes and mean and aggressive in our social media posts in this podcast. Like that's just not our culture of how we want to talk to them and how we want to portray them. And I think people would see that if they are open-minded to changing the way they talk about their bird, they might really rapidly see some differences in interactions with birds.
That rhetoric is so, so important too, because it can become kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy. And
Yes.
I mean, for humans, we are the stories we tell ourselves about ourselves. Same for our birds. They become that story, that narrative that we set up for them. So it's really important to take it as objectively as we can when we see that behavior, as opposed to creating labels for it, because a lot of the things we're labeling are human emotions or traits, things that these animals are not capable of. They're not capable of malice or being mean in some capacity, or even being a jerk. That doesn't mean anything to them. So it's important to not label, like you said, and to really change our rhetoric and our narrative, because we might be limiting our potential with our birds, or our birds' potential to have a really strong relationship with us, simply by the words we're using either in our minds or when we talk about them to other people. So I'm glad you mentioned that.
Even on like a not even just your bird level, I hear this, I overhear this a lot at the store, and it is frustrating to me as well. Like on a species specific level, a lot of times some
yes.
species get these overall labels that have been acquired over time, like the cockatoos. There was an example at the store where somebody walked by a cockatoo and was like, "You're gonna bite me, aren't you?" or something like that.
Like cockatoos always bite, yeah.
Yeah, or like, don't come near me, and that's really frustrating to me, because it's like you have no idea who this bird is, and this bird is an amazing bird, as they all are. And so when you go into it with those misconceptions, you're setting yourself up for failure, basically.
Yeah, and I think unfortunately a lot of those species that do get those labels are again, this is the tricky part of all of this, is that this is all objective experience-based information.
Of course.
Like it's not
Yeah.
research-based, but in my personal observations, I think the species that do get those labels most frequently, okay, your kikes, quakers, your cockatoos, sometimes the macaws, they get those labels, I think, because like those are the species that are most nervous. Like
Yeah.
they just are afraid. Like 90% of the day, they are just scared. And I think when people just realize that like these behaviors are not coming, like you're saying, from a place of malice, they're coming out of self-defense. It's so easy to change those behaviors, because you can make yourself far less intimidating to that bird by keeping your hands down, by talking softly, by doing the repetitive and predictable clicker training or positive reinforcement training. There are solutions to every single what you'd consider like negative behavior that a parrot would do, but it's going to start with the person always. And of course, like we want to acknowledge like there's environmental stuff that we need to take care of first. But I mean, I have also seen people with absolutely phenomenal parrot setups, huge enclosures, tons of toys. They're so well-intentioned, but still they're a little bit tough on the bird. Like they're just not seeing how much their behavior is impacting, because they're so well-intentioned, and they kind of say, how can this bird not respond well to me? I'm giving it this incredible diet. I have spent all this money and time and effort setting up this incredible enclosure. They've tried to do the clicker training and the positive reinforcement training, but there's something deeper happening also. Like it also is going to come from the emotion that you're projecting and like the way that you're approaching every single interaction.
In my experience, more often than not, when I hear folks say that the clicker training doesn't work or didn't work, it's usually they're getting in their own ways. And we're humans. We're going to get frustrated. It's challenging. But I think people sometimes get discouraged or frustrating when they're not seeing an immediate result or participation from their bird. And they just kind of discontinue that practice or it falls to the wayside. And that is really challenging to remind ourselves that it is that predictability and consistency that maybe we're not seeing a direct result or outcome now, but if we stay the course, we will. And the same thing goes for just the mindfulness. It might feel awkward at first or require a lot of energy to kind of check in with yourself. But as we practice that over and over again, it does become easier. And the bird starts to expect that energy. And it's easier for them to let their guard down then too.
Yeah, I mean, it's just patience. Kindness is patience. And you don't have to be like a robot around your bird.
True.
You know, it's just be a human being.
Yeah.
Like I like to have, you know how usually when you talk to animals, you always change your voice.
Yeah.
For some reason, it's been so I like to talk to like any bird that I like I'm gonna interact with in like a normal conversation. I find that works for me. And they respond to it well. So it's just whatever works for you.
I think because they're so intellectual, like
Yeah.
they are conversational animals.
Yeah.
Like it is, I see myself doing it with Rue. I mean, we all like have this thing, but I know Rue, well, I don't know. I really think Rue is the smartest bird I've ever
Yeah.
met.
Oh
I
my
mean,
God.
There's a lot going
It
on
is
in there.
absolutely. And like every day I see it more and more in her. Like this bird freaking knows everything that is about to happen, that has happened. Her memory is insane. But I think like it's crazy. You're bringing up something that I think people should take into consideration because she listens when you talk to her in a normal
Oh my gosh,
conversational
those little
voice.
eyes when she looks at you.
It's unbelievable. And now I've started doing it with Rascal too. Like I talk to her. Like I know it sounds like probably looks crazy. I'm like, hey, like I'm typing up this computer and writing this email right now. Like I'm telling her what I'm doing because I see them responding to the conversation we're having. And again, I think it just comes from like, that's a kind way of talking to the animal. Like, and it doesn't feel ingenuine. It's your genuine conversational voice, and parrots are highly intellectual and they're going to see like, oh, this is interesting. And I really think they're listening. And I think that's also why parrots that have really like incredible talking skills have what we feel sometimes is comedic timing. Like I know the other day, Toby made us all like hysterically laugh because I don't remember what I asked him.
Oh,
yeah,
no,
you were
did
there.
I miss it?
No, you were there. We
Oh.
laughed. Remember I like offered him something
Oh.
and he was like, "What?" We were like dying laughing. Like I really think they do start to contextualize conversation and they
we
know,
drop stuff and Rascal goes ha 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 at us.
and
Yeah.
or says uh-oh. Like
Yeah.
they know what is happening, and I think they have such an intense awareness that again when you neutralize yourself like that,
Yeah.
like they respond really really well to it because I think there is a little predictability in a conversational way of talking to the bird. And I think probably, and I watch how you are with them, like you're also not doing like really obnoxious movements when you're talking to them. You're making yourself very approachable. And I think that's why birds end up like gravitating towards you and why, and with all of our staff too, like the birds kind of come to us because we're not forcing it. We're just
Right.
letting it come naturally to them. So, all right, well, that kind of got heavy, but I think the biggest, I have a lot of goals in this podcast, but like it is a huge goal of mine to really change how people talk about birds.
Yeah.
I really want it to be something. I don't think it's starting with us. I think there's a lot of parrot communities out there really trying hard to do this. And I watch people online like call people out for calling their birds mean things, and they kind of say like, hey, maybe don't call them that mean name and you might have a better relationship.
Right.
So I know we're not the only ones fighting this good fight, but I think the more people that get on board with it and helping people realize like they're just innocent animals, they're not choosing to be in the situation they're in. We as humans are putting them in this situation. Like they deserve all of the kindness in the world. and every kindness you can possibly afford. I mean, that's all animals in captivity, but
Oh yeah.
particularly parrots, because they are so intelligent and they're so emotional. Like the more kind you are to them, the more content and relaxed they're going to be.
Yeah.
So,
Definitely.
well, guys, thank you for always showing so much kindness to the birds. Our whole staff is really, really good about that. And I'm really grateful that you guys are always like so on board with our goals. And I appreciate that you really work hard to have your actions match the words that you're telling people. Because I think people would see that when they come into the store. Like, we are really trying hard to like be good examples of what people should be doing with their parrots. So, all right.
Yeah.
Well, I guess we'll finish with our tagline. But before we do that, is if anybody listening can either review or like our podcast, the more you guys share it, also, the more it will reach a bigger audience. So we really appreciate you guys kind of continuing to support our little podcast here. And if you guys want to comment or give us suggestions about things you want us to talk about, this is just the beginning. So we have so much more that we want to do with this podcast. There's so many topics that we want to like really continue to deep dive into. I think eventually our goal is to try to bring some guests onto the podcast as well. So any feedback that any of our listeners can provide, we're happy to hear it. Hopefully positive feedback is always appreciated. But anyway, thank you all so much for listening. And as always,
be kind to your parrot, and it'll be kind to you.
I love it. All right. Thanks.
So in sync.
Thank you for listening. So to all of our listeners out there, we want to give you a huge, huge thank you for listening to our Parrot Stars podcast. This is the end of season 1, and I had a lot of fun with Ashley and Avery kind of putting together this podcast. And Julian, our producer, has been a massive, massive support and help. Stay tuned because this is just the beginning. Our hope and our goal is to continue to produce this podcast, to continue to share information about parrots, both in captivity, but also in the wild. Hopefully you guys have gained some really great content and information from listening to this. And as always, be kind to your parrot and it will be kind to you.